Morning, everybody, and welcome to our June Catalogers training session. We're happy that you've all decided to join us this morning. As you've noticed, we have started recording, and we also have live transcripts on this morning for anyone who would like those. As normal, if you have any questions, go ahead and ask them in the chat area. Our staff will be monitoring that to ensure that the speaker or whoever you're asking the question of sees those questions. Also, we do miss it, go ahead and raise your hand. We'll get a notification of that as well, and we can answer your question that way. For the share update, I have a couple things. As most of you hopefully know, yesterday was the last day that share member library staff could use their browser to access Polaris. We're expecting to be busier than normal, as some members may need some additional support to get that remote access to the staff client set up. I'm going to put the link in the chat box for the instructions if you still need it. And then also John Kinner's contact information if you need any assistance at all. And then just an FYI, IHLS will be celebrating Juneteenth on Monday, June 20th. So all of our offices will be closed, and we shouldn't, unless there's an emergency, which case you can call the emergency number. Otherwise, we will be answering emails and be back in the office on Tuesday. And that is all I have. So I'm going to turn it over to Linda for the Bibliographic and Cataloging Standards Committee update.
Good morning. This is Linda from the Carbondale office, and the Bibliographic and Cataloging Standards Committee meets quarterly via Zoom, and the next meeting is Friday, July 15th from 10 to 12. You can register in L2. All catalogers are welcome to attend as visitors, and it does count towards your 15 hours of training. If anyone is interested in joining the committee, please contact Donna Shaw, director of the Argenta Oriana Library, who is the chairperson of the committee. So now I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can everybody see my screen now?
We can.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to be covering all the topics in the miscellaneous section, just in a little bit of different order than what they're in on the agenda. First, I'm going to start with how to filter OCLC to show only English language of cataloging records. And you can see here, I have Marian Stubenitsky as the author, and I'm going to search for her. And if you look in the far right-hand column, you can see that these records are available in Danish, Dutch, Swedish, and English. So it's not too bad with just this few, but sometimes when you get a record or when you're searching, you get a whole page full and there's different languages. So to make that easier on you, we're going to go back to the search box. And right here, down at the bottom left, you click the Apply Language of Cataloging Limiter. And from the drop-down menu, choose English. And then we have only 3 records, and these are all records which are cataloged in English. So the next record, or the next item, is a reminder on set versus individual records for multi-part print items. Here I have the OCLC record open for Blackbird. It's a manga. And as you see in the O2Os, there's the ISBNs for 19 different volumes. Now, share policy is that each of these monograph items would go on its own record. So let me show you the share website. If you go to circulation, policies and procedures, I'm sorry, cataloging, policies and procedures, attaching to set versus individual records for multi-part print materials other than serials. And if you go down to the 3rd bullet point, you'll see that it says use an individual record for separate works published in a series. And the example they give is example is the Great Books of the Western World series. Now, there are some times where you will use a monograph set record, and most of those times are multi-volumes that are published in the same year with the same title. And some examples are encyclopedias or multi-volume biographies where all the volumes have the same title. So the SHARE website and the policies and procedures will answer a lot of questions. So that's a great resource to bookmark. All right, on publication patterns, just a reminder that those are created by SHARE staff. Each library creates their own serial holdings record for each title. And then you attach to the patterns that are created by the SHARE staff. We do this so that patterns remain consistent and the numbers manageable. And if you need a pub pattern, you can contact Sue Pearson or me, or submit a help desk ticket. Okay, the next thing I'm going to share with you is LEAP. And this is going to show you how to copy and paste in LEAP. I'm going to use the Find tool. And I'm going to search by author. And I'm going to use some of my favorite authors. Okay. Well, that didn't go as planned. We're going to go to authors. Phrase. Well, let's choose a different author. Okay, we're going to CJ Box here. And I'm going to open season, go to Mark. And I'm going to copy and paste the information from the 800. So I would click in the box, edit tag, and then copy the information from the data box. Close. Then I'm going to close this record. I didn't mean to close, I meant to go back to results. Sorry about that. We're going to look for CJ again. And CJ Box, if you have patrons that like the movie or the TV show Yellowstone, that's a great, would be a great recommendation for them. So now I'm going to go into the Mark. Now here, there's no 800 field. If there was an 800 field, you would just click edit tag and then paste the information here. But since there is no 800 field, we're going to insert data field 800. And then you can see it pops up with the indicator, and this information is always very helpful. So we're going to go with surname, paste, and then you would hit OK, and there you would add your record. Now, going back and forth between records like that can be a little bit awkward. So there's a couple of different ways you can do this. If you see the little hamburger menu here, you can click on that and pin it. And you see open season there. Click on that. And then when you go to current, you can toggle back and forth between the two records. Now that is helpful, but sometimes even that's a bit awkward, but there is a way that you can open records side by side, but it can't be done in a single tab. So I'm going to show you how you can do that. You can do it if you have records pinned. So I'm going to copy the link. I'm going to open another tab, paste that link, and paste and go is easier because it takes you directly, saves you a couple of clicks. So it's loading open season there. So you left click on it and drag it down. We can go to blood trail. And then we minimize. And then you have to do, if you have two screens, this works great. If you have one bigger screen, you kind of have to, search them around or stretch them around a little bit. And there you can compare them side by side. So you don't have to start from the pin screen. You can start from the search screen, and I will show you that. Find author. Brad Thor, if you like thrillers, a great thriller. I'm reading one right now. So I'm going to open State of the Union. And then I'm going to copy and paste State of the Union into the second tab. It takes a moment to load. Drag it over here, click. I'm going to go back to the results and minimize the second one. And then once again, you can arrange them on your screen or pull them to your second screen. All right, I will pass it on to the next person in line. If anybody has any questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat. And there should be a set of instructions in L2 that has this information. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. All right, is it Sue next?
Pam with the CMC.
Pam. All right, Pam.
Sorry, I thought there was still one more thing to go, the filtering of OCLC. Anyway, we have our Moodle courses for this next fiscal year, meaning July 1 through next June, already posted in L2. So feel free to register for any of those. And I'm adding a link. We've got it on our CMC page too. Hopefully this week I will get our FY 2023 online with the CMC webinars added to L2. Our first one is going to be August 11th, the basics of digitizing photographs, and Katie X, our metadata cataloger, along with our CMC intern, Emily Doring, will be presenting that. So hopefully I'll get those in L2 this week. And I think that's all. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, I think Sue's up next.
Hi, everyone. We are going to show some examples of a puzzle, board game, card games, and tarot cards that we've cataloged recently. I'm going to share my screen. Well, get CLC to open. Is everyone seeing that? The OCLC screen?
Yep.
Okay. So first, I want to show you what I cataloged. I did a jigsaw puzzle. And here it is. And I know these pictures are not great, but I did a 300-piece jigsaw puzzle. This is the top of the container. Shows a picture of the puzzle, gives a title, Memory Lane. Also gives another title down here that's kind of hard to see, but it's called Countryside Park. I also used one side of the container for some information, and the back of the container. So this is the puzzle that I am cataloging. Oops. When I got this puzzle in, first, I want to make sure that it's, well, see if it's either in Polaris already or not. So there's some different ways you can search for a puzzle. I would guess the easiest way would be to start with just scanning the UPC number. So I did that and I didn't come up with anything, but that doesn't mean it's not in there. It could be that that wasn't added when it was cataloged. So there's some other, I could do a publisher search. So this was created by Pieces, it's called. So if I do this, I can see that there are 4 other jigsaw puzzles listed, or at least 3. I'm not sure what that top one is. But I don't see my titles, either of my titles. I could do a title search. So one of my titles was Memory Lane. And I'm going to do a keyword search as well, just with jigsaw puzzles. Because Memory Lane, I might get a lot of results. I'm not getting anything. And then I'll try my other title, which was Countryside Park. Not getting anything. Another thing you could search by is the genre terms. And one is jigsaw puzzles. So this actually gives us 200 hits. If I do my Control-Shift-A, I can open them. I'm going to sort by title. And then I could just scroll through and look at the titles and see if I see my puzzle listed anywhere in the list, which I'm not seeing. So there's several ways you can search for a jigsaw puzzle in the Polaris database. So I'm not finding it. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize this, and I'm going to go into OCLC and open a search. And really, I'm not going to do I would do the exact same searching I did in Polaris now in OCLC to see if I can find it. I did this. I did not find anything. So I went on to go ahead and create a new record for this jigsaw puzzle. So I'm going to cancel that, and I'm going to open my record. So here is my bib record that I created. And I think we'll look at the fixed fields last. So let's go ahead and just take a look at the variable fields. Of course, we have our 040 with our subfield B English and subfield E RDA. I did enter the 024, which is the UPC. I have a first indicator of 1, which indicates that it is the universal product code. I found 2 different numbers on my container, so I've entered both of those. Subfield B is always going to be the same as your subfield B in the 264. So whatever you have in your 264 is going to be your subfield B also in the 028. I did enter an 041 because I have a 546 language note. So I did go ahead and enter an 041. The text on my container is in both French and English. So I did my 041. First indicator 0, which means it's not a translation. And the subfield A is language code of the text. So we have the text in English and we also have the text in French. I entered an 092 for the call number. 793 is indoor amusements and 0.73 is puzzles and games. So my call number is 793.73. And I don't know why OCLC always pops in an extra 092 field after I save. I'm not sure why. The 049, I entered the artist as in the 100 field. Artist is a relator term. So I thought I would enter him. He's prominently displayed on the back of the box. This will make it searchable in an author search if somebody's looking, or a keyword search. If somebody's looking for jigsaw puzzles that feature this specific artist. In the 245, I went with Lane as the main title because it's definitely the most prominent title on the container. I think it's probably, well, not probably, it's a, let's see. I think it's a series title. There's probably several of these jigsaw puzzles under the Memory Lane series title with different individual puzzles. This one and my subfield P is just another name for the work is Countryside Park. That's also on my container under the actual picture of the puzzle. It's very small, but it's on there. I entered two 246 fields, first indicator 3, and my first one, I have a second indicator of 0 because this is part of the title. And then I just entered a variation on the spelling in the second 246 with a first indicator 3 and then the second indicator blank. My publication information, my publisher is Masterpieces Inc. They are located in Oro Valley, Arizona. And since I could not find a date anywhere on my container or online, I did a range of dates with a question mark because it's just really not clear when this, I'm certain it was within the last 20 years, but I'm just not certain of a definite date. This is how the 300 would be. We have a subfield A with 1 jigsaw puzzle. It's 300 pieces. Our subfield B is physical details, which it's cardboard, it's color. Subfield C is the assembled size is 60 by 45 centimeters. In the box, it's 21 by 21 by 6 centimeters. And there is an accompanying poster, which is 28 by 46 centimeters. So that's basically my physical description of this item. Then we have our 336, 337, 338 fields. 336 is content type. 337 is media type. And then my 338 is the carrier type. I have entered 340 fields. I don't believe these fields are required at this time. if they're in the record, you can leave them, you can add them if you want, but they're not required fields at this time. I went ahead and entered them 340 cardboard with the RDA MAT and my subfield 2. 40 is the dimension, another 340 field, subfield B are the dimensions, and then there's a 340 subfield G that just says its color. I did enter a 490 first indicator 0, which means it's not a trace series. But this is definitely a series for this puzzle called Memory Lane. I did find other titles under that series title. So I went ahead and added it, even though, like I said, it's not a trace series. And then I added several 500 notes, completed puzzle dimensions in inches and centimeters. This was kind of prominently displayed on the front of the container, 300 easy grip large pieces. My next note is from a painting by Alan Gianna. And my last 500 note was a tracking number that was on the side of the container. And I put it on because it's really kind of a prominent number, or not all number, but letter and number combination. So I went ahead and added it. It listed it as the tracking code and gave that code. On the 520, you just want to give kind of a description of what the puzzle is. So I ended up putting, this is a 300-piece puzzle. It depicts a countryside park with a park bench overlooking a covered bridge over water, flowers and foliage, and birds and butterflies. So that kind of sums up what you're looking at in the picture. There's my 546 language note. That text on the container is in English and French. There was a note on the box that this is for ages 14 plus. So I put that in the target audience note. I did get the title from the container itself. So source of description note is title from container. That's a 588. Then I went ahead and entered some subjects, landscapes, covered bridges, parks, flowers, all are depicted in this jigsaw puzzle. I always want to enter my genre form term as jigsaw puzzles. And then I went ahead and entered a 700 for the artist. I probably didn't need to since he's up here in the 100, but I went ahead and put him down there as well. And I think that's it. This is, oh, let's look at the fixed fields. Forgot about the fixed fields. So up in the fixed fields, first we have the type of record. I entered R, which is 3-dimensional artifact or naturally occurring object. The bibliographic level is M, meaning it's a monograph. My descriptive cataloging form is I for ISBD. We will not have an encoding level or a form of item. The type of visual material is G, game. Our cataloging source is other. GPub, it is not a government publication, so I'm leaving that blank. Technique N for not applicable. I left the audience blank. You could, I guess you could, if it was a, you know, a puzzle intended for children, you would probably enter an audience level in there. time, the running time is NNN. Again, it's not applicable. This isn't a video or something like that. There's no running time. I'm going to skip up here to language real quick. So the language is English. And then on our type of date publication status, I entered a Q there for a questionable date because I wasn't exactly sure. And then I put my date range that I have in my 264. So questionable date between 2002 and 2022. And then the last thing in our fixed fields is just the country, and it's Arizona, United States. So it's AZU. And I believe that is it. Is there any questions? I'm going to stop sharing. We are going to post these finished bib records on L2 after the meeting. So if you want to go back and look at a finished bib record that any of us are showing you today, they will be available on L2. And if there's no questions, I'm going to pass it on to Josh, who's going to show us a board game.
Hello, everyone. Today, I'm going to take you through a record for a board game covering important points. Excuse me, my throat's a little hoarse today. Covering some important points in the process that are particular to board games. I'll be showing the record in Polaris, and if you'd like to follow along, I'm going to display the Polaris control number on my screen here in just a moment. There we go. The number is 3908118. And I will give the number again in a moment when it's time to look at the record in Polaris. Searching for board games. I'm sorry, what was that?
Oh, sorry, Josh. I thought you were pausing for a moment to pull it up. There was a question that came in, but it's not related. Is it okay if I answer that one real quick?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. The question was, will there be a July catalogers training session? No. We will take July off and we will return in August. Thank you for that brief moment of interruption.
Not a problem. So searching for board games in OCLC or Polaris is generally going to be limited to title searching. Some games will have an author listed in the 100 field, typically the game's credited designer. We'll touch on that more in a little bit when we look at the record. Board games don't have an ISBN, which unfortunately removes one avenue for searching in OCLC, but they will usually have a UPC number, or the game will always have a UPC number. Sometimes they'll be in the record in the 024 field. Stu was demonstrating that with the puzzles as well. A title search for a board game may bring up many records that differ only on year and place of publication, none of them matching the item you have in front of you. Especially if a game has a very broad international release, it may see republication every year, which will mean a new OCLC record. This is a good opportunity to get acquainted with the derived function of OCLC if you find a record that almost matches but is differing just in the year or the place of publication, because oftentimes the rest of the record will match exactly what you need, and then you will only have to make a couple edits to it. So now I'm going to pull up the record in Polaris. I had to edit it significantly from OCLC, and I lost that local save file, unfortunately. So I'm going to pull the record up in Polaris. The number, again, if you want to follow along, is on the screen. It is 3908118. Zoom in on this a little bit. So as noted before, board games don't have an ISBN and thus won't have a 020 field. They can and should have a 024 field with an indicator of 1, indicating that it's a UPC code, and then that will be in subfield 1. This will come from the barcode for the game, which is printed on the back of the box, typically. Next is the 028 field, which contains the publisher's name, and then if they have an internal code for the game in question, typically that's going to be on the back of the box, also next to the barcode, or with the publication information, which will be on the back of the box or in the game's instruction book. Do check for a match. If you can find this number in the record and on the game, check for a match, because a different number could indicate that it is a different version of a game. This is fairly uncommon, but not unheard of. So if you can find those numbers, not every game is going to have them, but if you can find those numbers, do make sure that they check, or do make sure that they match. This game has a Library of Congress call number. Don't worry about that if your record doesn't have one, or if you're doing the original cataloging. The Dewey call number should always be 794. I'm not sure what the call number attaches to, but that's what all board games should be, so make sure it is that. There may or may not be a 100 field for a game for the primary person involved. This game does have one, because on the front of the box, which I will pull up here in just a moment, the designer's name is featured prominently at the top, and it's also featured prominently several other places. For a game that does have a single or maybe a couple prominent designers listed, we do want to have that 100 field, because that might be a point that our patrons are going to want to search for. So up here it says a game by Matt Laycock. So you'll see that's who we've got in the 100 field with the subfield E of designer. Again, not every game is going to have that. If you're cataloging, especially older board games where that wasn't common for a designer to get a lot of credit, Monopoly is not going to have a person listed in the 100 field, for instance. And some newer games won't as well, but it's very uncommon with older games, particularly. If there is a 100 field for the game, then your 245 field will have a first indicator of 1. If not, it should have a first indicator of 0. This is pretty standard. You've got your title for the game in subfield A, your statement of responsibility for the designer, and the artwork. Again, this is not always listed, but is in this case in subfield C. Locally, as local share practice, we do add a subfield of H with game in brackets for our general material designator, our GMD. Do not add this to the OCLC record. It's local practice only. If you're using Mark Report to check your records, it will return an error that says not to use a GMD. Ignore that. It's not RDA compliant technically, but we do situationally use them. We use them on a few other things as well, large print, audiobooks, things like that. So down here in the 264 field, we've got our copyright and publication information. They can be tricky to nail down for board games and are going to be the most common source of mismatches between otherwise very similar or identical records. If you search for Pandemic, this game in OCLC, you will find a number of entries for every year, because the Canadian version has a publication location in Quebec. The French version has a publication location in France. And then for every different year, there will be several different locations. So there may be many, many records that each only differ in this aspect. So make sure you're checking that. Obviously, you should with everything, but they vary a lot more with these than they will typically with books. This information is typically found on the back of the box, as well as on the last page of an instruction book or sheet inside the box. Sometimes publication information for multiple countries will be listed on one box. Just choose the one that makes the most sense for the piece you have in hand. For this copy of Pandemic, for instance, it had publication information for both the United States and France. I included the US publication information and did not include the French publication information. The 300 field, subfield A, should include all of the pieces that come with the game. This can usually be found printed on the box itself or on the instruction book or sheet inside the box. Do not feel obligated to personally count out all of these little wooden pieces, cards, tokens, what have you. We can accept the number that is given on the box or on the instruction sheet as being correct. Please use subfield B to note not only the material types of cardstock, paper, and plastic in this case, but also color to note whether the game pieces have color. They almost always will. And this includes the instruction book. Subfield C will indicate the size of the box measured in height, width, and depth. The 330 fields will typically be the same across all games. So once you get that down, that's something that doesn't have a lot of variation. Content type here, the 336 will be three-dimensional form. The media type 337 is unmediated, meaning you don't need a separate item to use this game. The 338 for carrier type there will be one for object. And in this case, there is also one for card. This indicates that there are cards that are a necessary part of playing the game. This is a point that will be the most common exception, common difference in these 330 fields. Many games have cards of some kind or another, especially modern board games, but it's not universal. So if the game does not have cards, make sure you don't have that carrier type in there.
Josh, we had a question come up.
Yes.
Okay. Do board games always have a copyright? A couple of other catalogers have chimed in, and then a continuing question for it is it okay to continue with it if there is no copyright?
I would say it is probably uncommon that there's not a copyright date given, but we've seen plenty of books and other materials that don't have copyright dates listed on them. So it's definitely not unheard of. It will likely have a publication date on it specifically. This game did not. It had the copyright date listed and then did not have a separate publication date. If it does only have the publication date, you can just put that in the 264 subfield 1 or indicator 1 subfield C. Just it wouldn't be in brackets if it's listed as a publication date. If there's not a date at all, if there's not a date at all, I would do some searching online to see if you can find a date, at least of first publication, because that is probably a thing we're going to want to have in the record. It would be surprising, I think, to find a game that didn't have some date or other listed on the box somewhere.
Okay, and then can we do as Sue did with the puzzle?
In what regard, April?
And you can unmute yourself if you'd like, April.
Yes. Yeah, if there just isn't a date that we can find, then I mean, so be it. Obviously, that's going to sometimes be the case. But yeah, like Mary said, questionable dates would be acceptable if you just can't find one. Obviously, it's not preferred, but sometimes that's what we're working with. Yes, thank you, Don. Amazon is very helpful for finding a date. Even if it ends up not being the correct publication date, for some reason, it at least gives us an implied date that we can go off of. So yes, Amazon is a very good resource for that. Board Game Geek, yes, Susan McKinney mentioned Board Game Geek, so did Katie. Yes, that is gonna give you a lot of extra information. I wasn't sure if we were gonna dive that deep on this today, but yes, Board Game Geek is a great resource for a lot of this information. For if you find a game that doesn't list the pieces, for instance, on it, Board Game Geek will have that information more likely than not. It will have things that we'll talk about in later fields, like number of players, duration of play. Again, these are often listed on the box or on the instruction book, but not always. So it's a good resource to have, and we can might talk more about that another time. Board Game Geek is great, though, very useful for a lot of things. So I'm going to go on with the material types in the 340. Depending on how many material types we have listed in the 300 field, subfield B, you might end up with a lot of material types in the 340 fields. You should have one that matches each of those. So for example, in this record here, the 300 field lists cardstock, paper, and plastic. And then you'll see we've got 340 fields for each of those. The entry polychrome down here means that the game is in color, corresponds with color in that subfield B of the 300. So again, it will likely be in every board game you work with. I personally have never seen a board game that would be considered monochrome, but again, I'm sure there's one out there somewhere. The 380 field for form of work should be present. It should always be the same as this one, subfield A, board games, subfield 2, LCGFT. And then we get down into the 500 note fields. There will typically be a few for board games. There will be one that says how many players, one for duration of play, and then any other lines of text or notes from the box itself that might be important or pertinent. For instance, this one has a large subtitle, not even quite a subtitle, but a large field that says, "Can you save humanity?" So we put that on there. We also will have a 520 field, of course. Some games have this as sort of the thematic summary of the game, which will often be listed on a box. This game has one that, and I did not make this part of the record, so I'm not sure exactly if this was on the box or not, but that explains sort of the object of the game and how the game is played. I prefer those. They give a little more information to our patrons again, about what the game actually, how it functions, but it's not necessary to go into that much depth. This is another thing that Board Game Geek will likely have some good summaries of. So check there if you feel ambitious and like you want to add a little more information. The 521 field should be included. That is the suggested age range of the game. Again, that's going to be printed on the box the vast majority of the time. We also want to have a 588 field with the first indicator of 0 of the source of the title, typically going to be title from container. For the 650 fields, choose a few subject headings that correspond to the theme of the game, if there are any. I'm seeing a question in the chat. 340 polychrome be a subfield G versus A? That is a good question. I am not 100% sure. I am not as familiar with some of the RDA subfields as I should be. So that might be the case. It is subfield G. Thank you, Bonnie and Mary. I'm going to correct that right now on my Polaris record. Thank you so much for catching that. For the 650 fields, one thing we want to make sure we do not use is a subfield X of games. Per the Library of Congress, this is meant only for use as a subdivision under ethnic groups. I'm not sure I fully understand the use it would have there, but it is not meant to be used for board games or card games or things of that nature. So we want to make sure we're not using subfield X of games. For the 655 fields, the most common that we'll want to include are these two down here, puzzles and games and board games. There may be some others that would be appropriate, but these will be the two that will be on almost every record. 700 fields, we do want to include 700 fields for prominently. Oh, Bonnie, thank you very much. I'm sorry. I should not make corrections when I am not 100% on that subject. Thank you, Bonnie, for catching that again. Goodness me. We do want to have 700 fields for prominently attributed people who worked on the game. In the case of Pandemic, the artist is credited on the back near the publication information. They were mentioned up in the 245 field as well. So we want to make sure we have the 700 field for that person listed as an artist. We also want to have the publisher listed in the 710 field. Some board games, as Katie just noticed, have 856 field with links to the game's instructions, instructional videos, so forth. These are great. I love them. Leave them in if they're already there. if you're feeling ambitious, please feel free to add them. I love seeing these made available to help out our patrons. Oftentimes, it only takes a couple minutes to find, especially the instructions for the game. We have a link to the PDF instructions of the game on the publisher's website. Especially that often can be found just very quickly. Not mandatory to include them, but if you can, it just takes a minute, and it is a great thing you can give our patrons. And the instructional video especially, that if you know how to find good instructional videos, that's great. Include them. You can get down a rabbit hole of trying to find one that is adequate. I am not an expert on that. Katie might have some good YouTube channels she can recommend. I don't have one at hand, but if Katie has some to recommend, please feel free to put them in the chat, Katie. And then I'm not sure what this educational alignment sheet is, to be honest, but they had a link to it. It looks like it's at a university, so I left it in. I'm assuming it has to do with using the game in an educational context. But yes, if those 856 fields are included, do please leave them and add them if you feel so inclined. So that is going to be the end of our look at this board game. Thank you all for following along, and thank you, Bonnie, for catching my error there in the 380 field, or the 340 field. Thank you very much. I'm going to pass this off to Don now, who'll be taking us through a card game.
Okay, thank you, Josh. And this is Don out of Champaign, and I'm going to show you a look at some card games. Now, most of what Josh just said about board games applies to the card games. The thing that I'm doing that's a little different from the other two so far is that I have been doing a lot of the cataloging and searching in Leap, getting familiar with Leap, since that's looks like where we may be going eventually. So I'm going to share my screen here. There it is. And okay. So here's our Leap screen, and we had gotten in some little games to catalog, and as I said, not all the information is always on them. These particular games did not have any kind of numbers, no UPC, no ISBN, nothing of that sort, nothing even from the manufacturer themselves that publishes it. So we have to kind of do a title search on finding that one. And let me get rid of that. That's blocking what I'm doing. So the one game that I wanted to take a look at was one called Banned Books. Now, in the Find tool, I have changed it so that it goes to a bibliographic record first. For a lot of you, it's going to be defaulted to Patron, and then you can change it to a number of different ones. But like I said, most of them are defaulted to Patron first. I changed mine to go to Bib Record because that's what I'm using this mostly for. And I had it for ISBN because, face it, that's the quickest way to find things. But as I said, this one, there are no numbers, so we had to do a title search on it. And here we go. So it's called Banned Books. So get that search, and yeah, we got 46 results. Well, I'd like to narrow that down a little bit out of that keyword. So I always go with that one first and see what we get. Still got quite a few. Let's get a little narrower. And now 18. So so now I know these aren't books. Scan down to see. Well, here we are, Banned Books. Great. Open that one up. Now, one of the things I also like to do when I go into a new record like that, I like to see who made the record. So this case, I see it was created by Robert Brady back in 2019. Robert did an excellent job, with cataloging. So, but it is an older record at 2019. So there may need to be some changes made into it and look at it. So let's go take a look at the MARC record here. And first thing right at the top, I noticed with the leader, that it has the letter still in it. That's a change that occurred. Was correct when Robert entered it, but now we're supposed to be doing, for a full record, it should be empty. So I want to edit that tag. Pretty easy to do. Want to make it a full level. It's already at the ISBD. A lot of the older records, again, will have, you know, the A in there and that, but this one's correct one, so we can leave that one alone. It's okay. So, and coming on down, I like looking at the rest of these dates. I like checking the fields. You know, is there something that needs to be corrected or changed there? You know, so pull those up to take a quick look and see, you know, with the information, you know, is there something I know that I have with that item I have that needs to be changed or corrected? You know, but everything here looks good, so we can leave that one alone also. You'll see it has the RDA in here, which again, we want to watch for that in records when we're doing cleanup, because some of the older ones don't have that. We would want to add it. This one's good. So scrolling on down, you know, looking there, it's got the designer, it's got the GMD that we use in our record, as they've pointed out, not in the OCLC record, but in our local practice to help our patrons in finding these things and knowing what they found. You know, we've got that there. 264, so looks good. Sometimes those will be a 260 and we'd want to change that. Watch for those. The 300, we've got the descriptions there. Now you've noticed this does not have the 340s on here. And as we've said, you could add the 340s. If the information is in the 300, you don't have to have the 340 at this time. But you know, a lot of people are starting to add those for future, so you could take the time and add those in as well there. But it should be in one of the places. If it's not here in the B section of the 300, then it needs to be in the 340s, those kinds of information. The 300s are here. We always want to look and make sure they're added. Again, older records don't always have those 3x fields. We want to make sure and add those in correctly. 3-dimensional, you know, the media is unmediated, it's a card. And then the 380, so that's all looking good. Now 490, wallet games, and it's not traced. Well, I know that there are several of these, and because of doing some others, I happen to know that that has been traced. We want to change this one to a trace series. So again, click on there, go to the edit, and we can change that to series traced differently, and that will be ready to go. So there's change there. Now, next one, 500, title from the wallet covered. We're not using 500 for this, you know, field anymore. We're using 588. So let's try to change that. And this is one place where I don't like Leap is, you know, in OC, you know, in OCLC or, you know, in the other connection, you could have just changed that tag. Here, you can't change the tag. I can't make it a 588, leave it alone. But so I'm going to have to make a new tag. So while I'm here, I will copy the information, which is correct. And I want to insert a new data field. Okay, and it'll be a 588. Okay. Now, when you create those new ones, they go automatically to the bottom of the record, you know, at this time. But that'll get changed in a moment. You can move it if you want to right now. And sometimes I will do that to compare it to my previous field to make sure I got everything right, especially if I'm having to do editing within the field. And you know, you can move it up, use this to move a tag up or down and place it. But when you save at the end, it will index them correctly by the way it is set up with our Polaris system. So you can just leave it there for the moment. Now, I know that I've got that all corrected like I want, so I want to get rid of this one. Delete that tag out. And let's see, the series statement, we can leave that alone. Talks about 500 player, that all looks good. You know, it's got a duration, the 520, you know, the description that they're talking about. So everything's looking pretty good there. We've got the 650s for the subjects. We always make sure our items have a couple of those, or at least one, to help again patrons in finding something. They chose card games, prohibited books, strategy. And then for genres, they chose puzzles and games, card games. They also made a 655 fantasy games that they added to this one. They have the artist and the publisher. And the one thing I don't want to forget, I decided to trace this series. So Let me pull up something here for a moment. Oops. So I've got another record from that same company that has the information the way I want it worded. So I am again copying so I can copy and paste. I actually don't know if you can see me going into that other screen. So we'll come back here. Again, we want to add another field, data field. And what this is an 830. And there are no non-filing characters. And get our information in there. And so now we've added that one. Now, do that final exam, and if everything looks good, we do a save. Second. And you can see everything is placed, indexed in the right order. So, and then it also indicates that I've modified it. So we can see if a record's been modified again and when that was done. So that is what I kind of wanted to show, that LEAP is still not fully functional for us, but it's getting there and it is pretty easy. Visually, it's easy to work with. And that's what I wanted to share with some of you all today. And if there are any questions, and if not, then we will pass this on to Anna.
Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm going to assume, okay, cool. Well, I just wanted to come on the camera real quick to say hello, because I have not done one of these before. I think I was there at the last one to say hello briefly. But then I'm going to turn my camera back off so that I don't make, or if I do make any weird faces during my presentation, you don't have to be subjected to them. Nope, there we go. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay. Alrighty, and if there are any questions, someone can just let me know and I will pause. I'm going to talk about tarot cards. We got 5 sets of tarot cards from Scout Air Force Base, and Linda and Edie and I cataloged them. And we have a couple things to talk about. First, I'm going to go into this Word document that I have and sort of show you, in case you're not familiar with tarot cards, what they look like. That's the cover of the container. That's the bottom. The back gives a little summary and some pictures of the individual cards. And then when you open it, there's a guidebook that fits into this box with the cards and this little indentation. So that's a general idea of what we were working with. And I am going to show you the records in Polaris because I have them in a nice little record set here. When you're searching for tarot cards, though, in OCLC, you should be able to just search the title that's on the container itself, and that should bring it up pretty easily. If you just search tarot, it'll come up with a bazillion things and you won't be able to find anything. So I would search by the specific title. And you might have to also filter by visual materials because these are sort of in the same category as like puzzles and board games in terms of what type of material they are. So this is, let me make it a little bigger. This is my Polaris record. This is for Mystic Fairy Tarot. So we're going to go through, look at my notes, go through each field. We have, like I said, this is one that we created. So the 020 field is the ISBN. The ISBN for these, some of them had a different ISBN number for the guidebook that's inside the container and then also the container itself. For this one that we're looking at, it had the same ISBN, so I just had one. But just make sure if you do have a set of tarot cards to check that, because you might be adding multiple ISBNs for the guidebook and then also for the container. Let's see. We'll go back to the fixed fields and look at them. So for the 092, we have 133.32424, which goes to, I think it's reading tarot cards. It's something very specific that's about reading tarot cards. So I use that one because it seemed very relevant. And then we have the primary creator here. Edie and I used Linda Ravenscroft. She was the most prominent creator on the box. I don't think it's technically the right thing to use the illustrator as the primary creator, but because we were cataloging them as cards and she's the one who created the cards. So we used her for the 100 field. And then for the 245, let me see, we have Mystic Fairy Tarot. We also added a 246 with the other spelling of fairy, because maybe not everyone is a witch who lives deep in the woods and spells fairy that way. And then we have the GMD for Realia. We sort of went back and forth on whether that should be game or Realia, and we ultimately settled on Realia just because I think tarot cards, I think some people might see them as a game, but other people won't necessarily see them that way, and this seemed more appropriate to not be potentially offensive to people. So then Linda Ravenscroft and text by Barbara Moore. The first edition, let me see, let me scroll down here. We took in the 500, there's a note, edition statement taken from A Guide to Mystic Fairy Tarot, title page verso. So we got this edition statement from the guidebook that's included with the box. And then 264, there's this Llewellyn Publications. They seem to be publishers for a lot of tarot cards. Of the 5 that we had, I think the four out of the 5, they were the publishers. So that might be a common thing if you're going to be cataloging a lot of tarot cards, that you might see that multiple times. Let's see. Fairy is the Gaelic spelling. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay. This must be the English spelling. So this is more, I don't know, I feel like for Mystic Fairy, that's probably more correct. And then this was, as with the board game, we had the copyright date for 2007, and then the implied publication date up here for 2007. And in the 300 field, we have 78 tarot cards. I'm not super familiar with tarot. From what I understand, 78 tarot cards is a standard deck. So maybe with your set, there might be like a bonus card or something. I don't think that's really that common. It'll probably always be 78 cards. Has color illustrations. This is the size of the cards themselves, and then the size of the container. And then we have plus subfield E, 1 guidebook, 312 pages, illustrations, 21 centimeters. So yeah, like I said before, we decided to catalog this as cards because that seemed to be the primary object, and then the guidebook was additional material. And then 3x fields, we have them for the box itself, like the whole container. And then we have them for, oh, we have a question. Yes, very true, Katie. We had them for the cards and then the text of the guidebook. So we have for all 3 of those here. And then we had a 340 field for the cards. They're specifically paper. Already talked about the edition statement. And then the 520, the summary field, I took from the back cover of the guidebook, but you could describe it. I found that was really easiest. I didn't really know how to describe specific tarot cards. And some of them seemed to be used differently. Like some of them were more about the art, some of them were more about, a quick reference, how to begin in tarot. And some of them were like for a person who's already really into tarot and wants this other aspect of it. So you might just double check and make sure that what you put in there is reflecting what that specific deck is for, I guess. Title and statement of responsibility from container. That's our 588 field. We did take it from the container. We didn't take it from the guidebook. Then in the 650 fields, these first 5 seemed fairly standard when I was looking in OCLC to other tarot cards that were out there. I think you could probably put these on most boxes of tarot cards. This mind and body and spirituality on the specific box of tarot cards that I was looking at, they had it said mind, body, and spirit. So that's why I added these. And then in 650, I added fairies because it is specifically Mystic Fairy Tarot. Let's see. And then for 655, we had 655 subfield or indicator 0 for tarot cards. We didn't want to put playing cards or like puzzles and games or anything because that didn't seem quite right for this. So we just went with that. But if anyone comes across a different genre term that they think would work better, I would be curious to know. And then in the 700 field for the container of work, Moore, Barbara, 1963, Guide to Mystic Fairy Tarot. So we have Linda Ravenscroft as the illustrator and the primary creator, and then text by Barbara Moore. So that's why we have this to reflect that it contains this guidebook that's called the specific thing. Let's see. And I'll show you on the other one. I'll go to the fixed fields. In this Animal Totem Tarot, it was the other way around. So this one has the title, and then Lisa Robertson was the writer and the author of the guidebook. And then Eugene Smith, who created the cards, was the illustrator, and it was flipped on this container. So we did it the way it was on the container. So just whatever you're looking at, whatever seems to be the primary creator, use that for your 100 field. Okay. Going back here, I think we talked about everything except for. So in the fixed fields, I don't know if I can make this bigger. The main thing you need to remember from this, most of this will be the same as when Sue was showing the puzzles, like all the tags will be the same. The 2 main differences are type of record. We chose K for 2-dimensional non-projected object. And then for this one, for type of visual material, we chose O for flashcard. And the reason we did that was based on Edie found from an OLAC newsletter from June 2018, someone asked a specific question, like, because Don did for like playing card, like more of a game for cards versus flashcards or activity cards. And in the example, people were asking about, they were like, well, I have this Go Fish set versus I have this set of like Jewish prayer cards that have like an image and a prayer on each card. And they were like, that doesn't seem to be the same to me. And so the answer was, if you have like a card game, it would be type R and then TMAT G. And then if you have activity cards or like these, the tarot cards or like a prayer card would be considered more of a flash card. And then you do type K and then TMAT O. So that's that distinction there. a card game versus just cards themselves that are used for some other purpose. Let me see. Yeah, so that's mostly it. Let me double check that I didn't miss anything. Yeah. And so these are some of the other ones. We had Gilded Tarot Royale, Starman Tarot. That was a David Bowie tarot set. So that was very exciting. And I don't know if you guys will be getting a lot of tarot cards necessarily, but if you want to see a set, assuming that they have made them available for checkout from other libraries, you could get one from Scouter for Space. So I will pass it back along to Jennifer, because that is all I have for the moment, unless there are any questions.
Thank you, everyone. That was absolutely wonderful and informative. We will make sure that all of the records are put up on both L2 and in the Moodle training area where we put the cataloging recordings. Those will hopefully go up within the next week. We'll also make sure that the transcripts are in there as well. We started doing that so that if there's any questions or people miss questions, they can go back and read the answers. Are there any questions in regards to the presentation, any of the announcements, any cataloging questions in general that we can answer while we're here? Okay, hearing none and seeing none. Yes, everybody will get the full 2 hours credit, even though we'll be ending early today, so don't worry about that. The next training session will be Tuesday, August 9th at 9 a.m. And then I am planning, either myself or someone else will send out a final CE hours update after probably the first week of July for this past fiscal year. And a question did come in. In the 300 field, is it unpaged or unnumbered? In regards, April, in regards to books, to the tarot cards, or just in general? Okay, books. I have seen it both ways. Any other staff want to put in there?
I mean, the way I've been doing it is like if I've counted the pages and I know how many there are, but they're just not numbered, then I'd say like 12 unnumbered pages. But then if it's like, if it's like a 300-page book and I'm not going to count them all because that would take forever, then I'd say 1 volume in parentheses unpaged. I don't know if other people do it differently, but that's how I've been doing it.
That would, yeah, I agree with Anna. That would be the typical way you would do that.
Generally, the only ones I like really count them for are board books, because otherwise it seems like it would take a long time and I'd probably mess it up anyway.
So one of the situations of cataloger's judgment, but I agree with Josh and Anna. So does that answer your question, April? Okay, perfect. All right.
Jennifer?
Yeah.
The examples in bib formats and standards uses unnumbered for pages, leaves, etc. Just FYI.
Thank you. Okay, so I was about to pull up bib standards. Okay, so if you want to, I'd probably go off bib formats and standards. I will put that link in the chat. Okay. Can everyone still hear me? One of my headphones just fell out.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right. So if there's no other questions, then I'm going to go ahead and wish all of you a great day, and we look forward to seeing you again in August.